Hello and welcome to Divisive Issues, the foul-mouthed, spoiler-filled comic book podcast where two comic fans and two non-comic fans talk about controversial comic books and comic book history. I'm Sly.
I'm Ryan.
I'm Phil.
And I'm Darryl.
Last time on Divisive Issues.
Yeah, spirals are cool, and
Spirals
snails
are
are cool.
Yeah, I heard this manga's like Gurren Lagann.
Yeah.
Spiral power, right?
So it is part 2 of Junji Itober. Yeah, Junji Itober, where we are
Man,
doing...
2 weeks really flew by.
Yeah, we are doing the second half of Uzumaki. And the first half was more vignettes about how scary spirals are in the small town getting overtaken by just the concept of spirals. And second half, we're going to get into the more overarching reason why.
Yep. And so listen to the first half if you have not, because we're going to jump straight into the second half. And if you don't know what's going on, go into a spiral.
If you need a quick recap, basically there's the small town getting overtaken by spirals, and we have what pronunciation did we land on? Kyrie?
We said Kyrie, yeah.
They say it's Kiri.
Now it's been 2 weeks. We can say Kyrie.
Yeah, Kira. Okay, it's Kira from now on.
Because I think Japanese is almost always pronounced phonetically, like the way you'd read it. So if it's Kyrie, it's Kyrie.
Okay, Kyrie.
So Kyrie is our protagonist, and she is refusing to leave town for some reason. And last we saw her.
And that's landed her in a hospital because she got burns from a lighthouse lamp.
Yes. And her boyfriend,
Shuichi.
Shuichi, is still trying to convince her to leave after his parents were killed and taken over by the spirals.
He kind of just stops halfway through this book. He kind of just
I guess he does kind of
He
stop.
just gets depressed and he's just like, the spiral.
Yeah, he eventually gives up. He's like, we're going to die. It's too late.
So she's in the hospital, and her brother didn't suffer as many bad burns, so he was allowed out. And as she's laying in bed reading Big Comic Magazine, which was the comic this is published in,
I thought that was just like a joke.
yeah.
Because when I was looking, I was like, that's me. I read big comics.
I'm a big boy.
There's a mosquito that starts flying around in a spiral and putting her to sleep. And as it does so, it drains her blood. And you're like, okay, this is a weird start.
And they say at the very beginning, that this summer our town was filled with mosquitoes.
Yep, and she goes outside and she takes a walk with her friend.
And it's just a mosquito tornado.
Yeah, she points out that
around.
there's a whirlwind, but mosquitoes actually do this, mosquito calms, where it's a bunch of males going out and swirling around to signal for a mate.
Really?
Yeah, just like it happens in One Punch Man, remember?
Yeah, I was about to say that.
Oh. Yeah.
Yeah, and then Kyrie just looks to her left, and there's a dead body that has a bunch of holes in it, and it looks like emaciated to and drained of its blood just in the bushes. And then they notice that there's all these pregnant women that have been getting drained of blood too, and they're being sent in by the stretcher loads.
They've been getting drained by blood. Drain of blood by mosquitoes specifically, but which mosquito bites all over the body.
Mosquitoes for some reason are swarming pregnant women in this town.
Yep.
Yeah.
And then
Kyrie sees her cousin Keiko show up, and she's like, "Oh my god, are you okay?" And she's like, "It's really weird. All these pregnant women being hospitalized." And as she's unpacking her cousin's stuff, she pulls out
Phil,
this
what
thing.
did you think this was?
I wasn't sure. I did not think where you're thinking. But
Okay, so it's like a long tube wrapped in bandages.
yeah, with a bend in it.
And so Kyrie goes, "What's in this? What's in this?
We can't stop.
What's in this cloth wrapping? It's heavy." And she's like, "Oh, don't open it. Just leave it in the cupboard."
That's for my private collection, Kyrie.
I was like, "This is a dildo, right?"
yeah.
So they find some more, there's just random hospital patients that have being drained of blood, and they're just dying in the middle of the night.
Right, so other non-pregnant patients are just being found filled with holes.
Yeah.
How do they not? They can't tell if these are stab wounds. They're just like, oh, these are random holes.
And they don't shut down the hospital and bring
Because
police.
they're very tiny holes.
Yeah, this is the most, what is wrong with this hospital. So Shuichi goes to see Kyrie, and he sees her, and he's like, "I've become a recluse. I hardly get out." And he's like, "You need to check out the hospital. Something's wrong with this place." And whenever Shuichi says something's wrong, it's always just
right.
spirals.
How does she not realize that everyone's dying of puncture wounds in this hospital? When he says something's wrong, like obviously any person would come to that conclusion.
Yep, and then the mosquito flies into the room while they bring in Keiko, her cousin Keiko into the room, and Shuichi just whips out a mosquito repellent and starts spraying it around, and everyone's like, stop, like there's pregnant women here, because he's just like spraying until the whole room becomes cloudy.
Keiko becomes very upset about this spray, more so than the other
Yep,
people.
and she starts coughing, and he explains, Kyrie, did you know that female mosquitoes are the only ones that suck blood? And it's because it's when they're carrying a batch of eggs that they have to develop.
So that night, Mosquito enters the room, and Kiri tells her sister, cousin, be careful that the mosquitoes sting you. And Keiko is like, I love mosquitoes, actually. I love them. And her eyes turn white, and it's pretty obvious she's like fucking creepy.
Yep.
Yeah, because the hospital's so packed now, it's so many people that they're roommates.
Yeah.
Yep, and then she starts hearing just like the zing in the hallway. So she goes out to see what it is, and suddenly just this giant like troop of pregnant women are walking around with like...
I think it's called a gaggle when it's pregnant women.
I think since they're mosquito people, it's called a
Swarm?
Yeah,
swarm.
and they all have like sunken in eyes and like an old face.
Yeah, and
like,
a bunch of dots all over their faces from the mosquito bites.
And most notably, they're all carrying hand drills.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which I use as dildos.
Oh, God. So as you know, the hand drills have spirals in them, and so what they do is they go...
Oh, I didn't even think of that.
Yeah, everything is spirals, man.
Fuck. This is good.
So they go into the hospital rooms where people are sleeping, and these pregnant women jam these hand drills into these people's, like, throats.
Necks. Yeah, like their jugular veins so they can drink their blood.
Yeah.
Hey, I hear that pregnant women have like crazy cravings, right?
Yeah,
Yeah.
for blood,
Like
obviously. That's what spirals do to you. They turn you into vampires.
And the next part of this book is so weird.
Oh my god, Shuichi was right!
Yeah, and the next part of this book is so weird because you just have one person after another come out and be like, "What's all that noise?" And then they get drilled and drained.
Oh yeah, but what they do is they actually like hypnotize them by moving their hands in a spiral pattern. The guys are people are hypnotized.
And the women's faces get more and more like fucking like the Joker.
Well, it's because they're just sucking blood, so their mouths
Yeah.
get covered with a whole bunch of blood. And so Kyrie is trying to like run away, and a guy comes out and is like, "Hey, what's going on?" And then he gets drilled and sucked. And then a woman comes out, like a nurse, and she's like, "Will you guys keep it quiet?" And she gets drilled and sucked.
I like because Kiri sees one of them doing that, and then they go back to their business killing all these other people, and then at the end they're like, let's go to bed. Like first we have to kill Kiri, and they turn to Kiri, and Kiri's just right there, and they go kill her. Like she's just hanging out behind them.
Yeah.
Yep.
And then so the horde is trying to get her, and her cousin is at the.
Well, she goes to hide in her room and close the door, but she's in the room with her cousin, who has a hand drill. Kyrie's like, "You told me it was a dildo."
Kyrie, in her desperation, finds the mosquito repellent. Or the mosquito,
Chekhov's bug spray.
Yeah, mosquito bug spray, and starts spraying it around the room. The pregnant women go running, and they're just like, and these babies are gonna be born soon.
Yeah, because she tells everyone like, oh, they're fucking drinking people's blood, and like you're crazy. No way this happening. No way we're gonna have an autopsy of these guys to see if they had fucking drills.
Well, no, I think they get rid of the bodies and stuff. Like, I don't know what people thought.
No, they did the bodies because they left the bodies before. Like it's clear. Like,
I think they mentioned that their like husbands are in on it or something. They're, like,
Yeah,
they've
they
been helping
mentioned
them?
that their husbands are in on it.
I think that was Kyrie's like assumption, but I think later we find out it's the hospital too.
Yeah.
the hospital's pretty fucked up in the second part. So.
This town is bad.
Yeah,
This town is so bad.
The story ends with basically these pregnant women getting away with murder. Not basically.
Yeah.
They
Yeah.
do.
And happily, like they're like, oh, our babies are so big and healthy in our bellies. Like,
And more importantly, Kyrie is worried because like these are babies gonna be born up, fed off of human blood. Like what's gonna be these babies gonna be like?
Yeah, and so the next chapter starts, and Kyrie is recounting about how she like found her cousin drinking blood out of a blood bag. Like that's what they're doing instead of murdering people now, is they're just sneaking blood. And then
Fucking True Blood, right, guys?
and so the babies are all born at the same time.
Yep, and they're all the sweetest babies she's ever seen. They're all adorable. They're all so cute and everything seems like normal. And you're just waiting for the stinger. You're like,
And the doctor's like, I'm honored to bring all these beautiful babies into the world. And then Kyrie's like, why is his stomach bulging? And then she's like, wait, all their stomachs are bulging. The babies start all crying at the same time, and the sound pierces her ear so badly that she falls down the stairs.
Yeah, Kyrie is stuck in the hospital.
Yep.
For until this whole next series of events happens.
yeah. So they bring her some food, and they're like, "Oh, here, eat this food. We have these new mushrooms." And she's like, "These are really weird. They have like spiral patterns on them." And she's like, "They taste kind of like meat." And the nurse is like, "Don't be a fussy eater."
I can't believe at this point She's like, I'll eat this weird meaty thing that has spirals all over it.
To be fair, after this, she's like, I'm not gonna eat this anymore. Like, and she stops.
Yeah, she stops eating.
Yeah.
She says, "I never ate them."
And everyone else loves this stuff. Everyone's like, this is the best meat ever.
Their eyes get like bulging when they're like, "I want more mushrooms."
Yeah.
So then Kyrie goes by, like, late at night, and she starts hearing the babies talking to each other in the nursery. And they're all like, I want to go back. Yes, go back to the womb, to the safe place. It's wonderful. Can we really go back? And they're like, of course. The doctor will do it. He took us out. He can put us back in. And then as they're
Do
saying...
you guys know that's like a real fetish?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Oh my god, Brian, you have to bring that up.
It's Unbirth, if anyone wants to look it up.
It's Darryl's fetish if you wanted to look it up.
So as all the babies are laying there in the crib, like their clothes burst open and it reveals.
No, they're talk about them going back in the womb and get them so excited.
Oh, yeah,
bellies
which is
burst
gross.
open.
Yeah, and it reveals that out of their like belly button, the placenta grows up into this giant mushrooms with spirals on the top.
Yeah, the umbilical cord regrows and reforms the placenta.
And it's like a spirally.
It's like a melting kind of mushroom.
Yeah.
Sort of like the pottery stuff.
And when she runs to go tell the doctor about this crazy event, the doctor's room is full of mushrooms.
It is a full page of just like dozens and dozens of mushrooms all grown out everywhere. And he comes out and he's like, yes, like wherever we drop the placenta, it would just grow into another mushroom.
He's like, and children grow up to be independent, but these babies, they want to be babies and fetuses forever. So like they're trying to become fetuses again. And he's like, of course, as a doctor, I had to eat some.
Yeah,
It's
my
like-
favorite line. I had to try one as a doctor. And
it's-
it's like when people are just like, for science.
It's interesting because like people do eat placentas. Like
Yeah.
it is like it is a lot of nutrients.
Yes, it is. It's true.
So it's like it's this weird.
It's called Unbirth. Look it up.
It's this weird. I don't mean as a fetish. It's this weird inversion again. Of,
It's like a hippie thing. You eat the placenta to be with your baby and shit like that. People do that.
And I think it's a lot of like vitamins or something in it because it's like it's supposed to support a baby. So like it's this inversion of that idea with this like mutant placenta that any particles or cells of it that fall on the floor just make more placenta. And so he's like, don't worry though, the operation was successful. And she
This
busts,
part like really fucked me up a little bit.
she busts through the room and there's her cousin Keiko and she's naked and her stomach has been sewn up and there is something in there. She's re-pregnant.
Yeah, and she has like these really sunken eyes because this was probably a procedure without anesthesia.
And she's like, well, I need she has to provide it with
Blood again to support this baby that's back in her.
And so she opens her mouth, this spirally spiked tongue comes out.
It's a mosquito snout sucker thing.
Oh, got
Yep,
it.
which is why it's so hairy.
Got
And
it.
and the doctor tries to hold Kyrie. Kiro, not
Kyrie.
Kyrie holds Kyrie to try to hold her in place so she gets her blood sucked, but she's the main character. She's the Kaiko sucks the doctor's blood instead. He becomes like a skeleton.
Yeah, and Kyrie starts crawling back through, and Keiko comes out with her like the mosquito sucker out, and she's like, "I need more blood." And then these people just start wandering from in the hall, and they're like, "Oh man, these delicious mushrooms! We finally found where they are." And they start,
As Keiko's coming in with her mosquito tongue towards.
yeah, this naked, repregnated lady.
Oh my god. And what's crazy is the scene is them with crazy eyes eating the mushrooms as her with crazy eyes drills their necks. And then Kyrie is just like, I left the hospital.
And she says, "I have no idea what happened after that. I wasn't about to go back and find out." And that's the end of the hospital arc.
Yeah.
So we go from something that's, again, it's like, that was like pretty gross, especially if you have like a phobia of everything regarding around birth. And we go to hurricanes. And hurricanes
I love this intro because it's just them. It's Kyrie and Shuichi sitting on the beach. He looks like the most miserable fuck in the world, and she's just talking. She's like, you're so great. Like I would have died a long time ago without you. And he says nothing. Right? And then
He's out of
and then a noise comes, and he's just like, oh my god, it's the storm. It's finally here. And he just leaves her and runs into town screaming that a typhoon is coming.
And everyone's like, "What a crazy man!" But it turns out, yes, the typhoon.
Yeah, they're like, "Oh, Shuichi, the town crazy guy who's prophesied 100% everything that's happened."
And as the hurricane or typhoon is hitting the town, they're the same thing, whatever.
Yeah.
She's like, I gotta go give him his lunch though. So she runs out into the storm, and
In the middle of a hurricane. It blows away her lunch and her umbrella and her food. And then she looks up into the sky, and it's just like all the wind is swirling around into a spiral, and then you can see the eye of the storm above her where it's clear.
The best part is in this panel, you see this big storm, you can see his lunch flying away.
Yeah, and before this, the little brother was like, I can't wait to see what a hurricane's eye looks like. And she's like, don't be stupid. Hurricanes literally have eyes. And yes, this hurricane literally has an eye, as we find out.
So she sees it, and then she runs back inside. And she's trying to like go to bed and stuff, and it's just making noise against her window, and then it starts going Hugh, but then it starts making noise like Kyrie.
No, it's Kyrie. That's why it's important you get it right, because the fucking story, it's important that it makes a noise Kyrie.
And so she goes outside and she's like, that was weird. Like it sounded like it was saying my name. And then she looks up in the sky, and the storm's just like still there, hanging above her house, and it starts making like shooting wind at her.
And then and then Shuichi runs out in the middle of the storm. He's like, "You idiot! The hurricane is looking at you."
It's calling for you clearly. It's clearly saying Kyrie, you dumb fucker.
Yeah, and she's like, "What?" And so he grabs her arm, and they're trying to run away from this hurricane as it starts throwing trees at them. And a whole bunch of wind, and
the eye of the storm is like just looking at them
it's
and
following
trying
them
to
in the sky.
Yeah,
It's like the Eye of Sauron.
Yep.
Yeah.
Quite literally.
and of course, luckily, someone who looks like Kyrie runs over, and it's like, "Hey, you guys need help?" And then the storm takes her.
It just sucks her up and he eats her like it's
it
the
sucks
mouth.
her up and it closes like a rectum or something, and then just spits her back out. Yeah.
It's really actually gross.
But then even then, so like it's silly that she gets sucked up and then spit out by the storm, but then we see her slam headfirst into the ground. And like we see her like her mouth is open, her face is lacerated, she's bleeding, and like even the silly moment, like I didn't realize how silly it was when I first read it, because I was like, this is fucking brutal. But now like hearing it in this context, it sounds very silly.
All of this sounds silly as we say it, but like I didn't think any of this was silly really.
Me neither.
The hair one kind of, but like
Yeah, if you're out in the middle of like a hurricane, that's not like a funny scenario. It's just
none of this was really funny.
It's the fact that this hurricane is following her because it like the idea is that it likes her, like it's like a stalking boy, and that's why it gets mad when Shuichi grabs her arm.
He does at one point say like, "Looks like I have a rival for you."
So they go and they hide inside of a tunnel, and this is like the climax of the story is the hurricane can't see them, the eye can't follow them, so it fires a like iron bar at this sign, and the sign bends over so it reflects so the hurricane can know where they are.
It like peeks through the mirror to see them in the overpass. So
at them.
Shuichi's like, "Let's get into the sewers. They can't find us here." But then the sewers, we didn't mention this earlier, but every time they see rivers in the town, there's little whirlpools everywhere.
Yeah.
And
It's a very cool effect.
Yeah, and in the sewers, there's just whirlpools, and one of the whirlpools just becomes this typhoon thing, and it just picks them up and spits them out of the manhole into the sky.
Yeah, into the sky, like through this jet of water that spirals up, and you're like, wow, okay, they're dead. But apparently not, because they're found inside of Dragonfly Pond shortly.
The hurricane was also sucked up by the pond.
Yeah, the hurricane picked them up and then went into Dragonfly Pond. And the weathermen are just like, pretty weird, but this hurricane just sat over a town and then disappeared.
Yeah, because think about it. It was moving through the side of Japan, and it sat over a town and disappeared.
This was the part where I was like, so you're telling me that this, like, all this stuff is being figured, like, people in the outside world are hearing this stuff. How does, like later on they're like, you can't leave or whatever, but for most of this, I'm like, if this stuff has been happening in the news, imagine hearing anywhere in the country that pregnant women were like drilling people, or that town.
No one ever came out with that.
Okay, so that a hospital had all these people dying and these crazy mushrooms growing in it.
That's the thing. It's I think it goes back into the theme of the spiral, where everything, like, crazy things are happening around it, but once you get sucked in, you can't get out. Like, none of this news gets out of the hospital or all this other stuff.
Nothing ever goes out; it all goes towards the center.
Right.
So, like, Phil brings up a good point where it's like, this is an anomaly, and shouldn't people do something about this? And we're about to see that things do escalate quite rapidly.
Very quickly.
What's happened is more hurricanes have, like... oh, no, this was just the first one. It devastated everything by Dragonfly Pond as it went into Dragonfly Pond. So, Kyrie's house got destroyed since her house was near the pond, because that's where her dad got the clay and everything. So they decide to now live inside it. They have to find a new place to live, and live inside one of the old rundown row houses. So
They don't decide to. They basically get forced to by
The government, the town government's like, this is where we have to put you. So
Yeah.
We,
And they even say like, this place sucks, and he's like, we could keep looking, but I tell you, they only get worse from here on out.
Yep. And this guy mentions, it's like, oh yeah, there's a rumor about this a thing going around that's eating pet dogs in the neighborhood, but that's just a rumor. So they go inside and they're living in this house. They meet like this next door neighbor who seems like really friendly and nice and everything.
He's just a young looking guy.
And then at night, Kyrie's dad is like, my foot, and it shows you his foot, and he has like this circular, it's mostly circular right now, pattern on his toe that's a
like a wart.
like a wart, wart or blister or something.
Yeah.
And at the same time, there's a hole in the wall, and somebody's eyeball is poking out this hole in the wall.
Yep.
So this young guy's not the only neighbor. There's another two people next door, an older woman and her son, and they never let them. The old woman never lets the son be seen for whatever reason.
Yep, and then they start hearing like howling at night, like ooh.
And she goes to put up some clothes.
The old woman.
It was presumably the son's clothes, and it's full of holes.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then they see like the old woman like topples over, and they see her hand, and it has all these like fleshy drills coming out of her hand.
Yeah, like horns.
Yes, like horns. Yeah. So then later in the day, the old woman starts like crying loudly, and they go to see her, and she says, my son has died."
Yeah, before all the ooh was the son crying in agony, and the rumor was he had a disease, and now it's the mother crying because his son has died.
Yep, and they had to take the body away, and only Kyrie saw it, and like the young guy next door was like, "Tell me what it looked like," because I saw like the room where it was at, and there was a whole bunch of like holes in the floorboards and in the blankets and everything. So like it must have looked like really like gnarly and crazy and sick. And then she just leaves him, and she notices like her and the rest of the family are getting those warts on their feet and hands.
And at the same time, you see the hole in the wall of the eye, and I thought it was a cool inversion because the first time they do this, they don't show the person behind the wall, and you think it's the creepy guy, the guy.
The guy going like ooh,
But it's actually a nice guy that was talking before, and he's like spying on them.
Yeah,
He is mesmerized by Kyrie too. A lot of people, like the Hurricane, was too. And,
Yeah.
yeah,
she's almost like the center of the spiral.
yeah.
So he's really mesmerized, and then he's like, "Whoa, damn! What happened to my hand?" And he holds up, and it has all like the horns on them and the spirals and stuff.
And now Kyrie's family, Kyrie's dad has it on her feet. Though the mom has it, and they're like, "What the fuck? The disease is spreading to us. We got to get out of here."
Yeah, and they
But there's
really
a
can't
hurricane.
like go anywhere because it hurts so much to like walk on.
and
those
the
things.
hurricane's like literally happening.
A new hurricane has come in. That was like the first hurricane. That was the second larger hurricane coming in.
They are literally called Hurricane Number 1 and Hurricane Number 2.
Yeah.
Good naming system.
They're like, we have to go, or else we're gonna die here, probably.
Yep, and her brother points out, it's like, what's happening to the wall behind us? And they turn to where the neighbor is, the guy that's spying on them, and there's just all these, like, drill horn growths coming through the wall, like hundreds of them. And then suddenly the wall breaks, and it's the neighbor, and he's just, like, fully infested with horns and growths to where he
Like
looks.
his teeth are horns, his eyes are horns.
They look like fucked up carrots.
Yeah.
And so he grabs like a nearby rat and eats it to show it's like these things are the ones that are eating the nearby pets. And then he starts going after Kyrie and trying to like grab onto her. And so she goes outside, and as he goes to eat her when she's outside, a hurricane shoots a metal spike through this guy's neck.
Yeah, this hurricane was like, I'm not gonna let you compete with her.
Yeah, not my girlfriend, not Kyrie-chan.
Notice me, Kyrie.
But this hurricane doesn't do that. It's just like that. We're joking around. It was just a regular hurricane.
Oh,
It's regular.
yeah. It just
I guess it's regular. It goes into Dragonfly Pond like the other one.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so then we begin like the final arc of the story, where it opens not with Kyrie or Shuichi, but with this reporter Chie, who's going into the mountains, like going through the tunnel and coming to this town to see. It's like, what's happening? Because
I thought this was interesting because this made a lot more sense to me why this town is so reclusive. It's like some of those towns in Alaska which are so remote that you have to go through these like tunnel systems to get there. And from what I've read in a lot of these types of towns, like when weather's bad and stuff, like they just don't get. You can't actually travel between them.
Mm-hmm.
So when they're like, oh, it's pretty remote, it's through this tunnel, through the mountains, like it makes sense then why it's hard to get news from here. And they explained that they've been trying to send in crews, but they've lost contact with all of them because of the hurricanes. They think
the hurricanes, because 4 more hurricanes after we last read this story have hit this town. and presumably been sucked into Dragonfly Pond. So they emerge out the other end of the tunnel, and then suddenly like a whirlwind appears and picks up the truck and throws it down and kills all the other reporters that Chie is with. So she gets up to go into this town, and she
tries to call for help too, which again was a thing that I'm like, oh, it's interesting. Like somehow the spiral is like taking their cell signal too, because she can't call for help.
Well, the cell signal is going spiraling towards the center of town, probably.
Yep, and her breath is like spiraling as it comes out.
That was such a cool effect, because she's like, it's not even that cold, but I can see my breath, and it comes out as spirals, and that's just like, after we're so deep in this book that like that was just. It immediately put me on edge.
Yeah.
Yep, and she comes out and like the entire town is destroyed. You can only see like a couple concrete buildings left standing, some like power line poles, and just various pieces of wreckage. And she's like, "Wow, this town like got decimated. What happened?" And then she
sees a new helicopter in the air,
Yep.
and Twister forms around it and just sends it crashing to the ground.
Yeah. So it's like no one coming in here can possibly get out. And she keeps walking forward, and she finds like the pond in the middle of the town, and it's become like this spiraling like whirlpool vortex. It's making all of this noise. It's like spiraling downwards. And then she turns to her right, and she notices these kids that are like tied up to these
Stakes,
yeah, and their mouths are covered. And she's like, "Wow, this is messed up." So she sets them free, and then this is a little weird, but it gets explained. These kids go to a house, and then they start chuckling to each other, and then they start blowing air at the house, and it creates a whirlwind that destroys the house. And you're like,
Use the proper terminology. They huff and puff and blow the house down.
Yeah.
yeah.
And they're like laughing about it. They're like, yeah. So they're like, oh, this woman's here again. She sucks. Let's get rid of her. And they blow
They
at her.
literally say she sucks.
Yeah, so it becomes pretty clear that these kids are sociopaths. Like,
Yeah, they
and
were
they're,
tied up to protect the village. What's left
Yeah,
of it.
so they probably should just kill these kids because.
Sly, not everyone's pro killing kids.
But they trying to kill the woman.
Yeah, and they
now,
do this by
blowing
like
at her.
holding out their hand and like making a swatting motion. It creates another whirlwind that goes over her head. And then she tries to get away from them, and then she screams, "No!" She creates a bunch of wind, like a typhoon, that takes them off.
She's Black Bolt is the twist.
Yes.
Yeah, she's like, why?
Why? And she doesn't understand what's happening. And then she meets Kyrie, who's with her brother, and they're out scavenging, looking for food. And she explains that there was so much air pressure created here from all these 6 hurricanes going into this lake that, like, any fast or rapid movement or shouting creates whirlwinds around the town, which is what's destroyed most of the town.
And so Chie's like, oh my god, I blew those kids into hell.
Yeah, by yelling no. She created a world. She black bolted them.
Yeah, just like Black Bolt, she has to live with that guilt now. Like, why?
They refer to it as the butterfly effect, that like the chaos theory where one flap of a butterfly's wings will create a hurricane on the other side of the world, but instead of the other side of the world, it's just right in front of you.
Yeah, it's a weird illusion because the
Yeah,
butterfly effect refers to like a fucking time travel and stuff like that.
And it's also small things affecting bigger things down the road.
This is small things affecting bigger things. It's just
This is small things blowing up buildings down.
This is like things you can see, which is kind of what the butterfly effect's not about. But anyway, they find out that the only buildings that have survived are these old-ass row houses.
Yeah, the ones they lived in, and now they all live in them now, all the people.
Everyone in this town.
And Kyrie is just like, you'll be safe here. Unlike our old place, it's not infected. And the reporter's like, what the fuck? Like, and so she comes in, and it's just full of refugees who all got their houses destroyed. Yeah. And the kids show up, bloody and with white eyes, and they're like, You killed the other boy.
Yeah, one of our friends.
And they start trying to blow down the house.
Yeah.
Huff and puff and try to blow down this house
So
too.
this is so weird. Like they're all blowing at the house, and the row house just stands, and they're like, "We're gonna get hurt."
The row house has windows that are like bars.
Yeah.
But it turns out that when they try to blow the house down, it turns out the houses are immune to the wind effect.
And so the adults are like, damn it, we can't let them do this. We have to fight back. And they all start blowing out of the house windows, and they send the kids to hell.
And we should clarify, people have to walk slow to avoid like blowing the wind too much and stuff like that. So only inside the row houses are people able to move normally. And
talk normally.
Talk
with each other too.
And they also, that's one of the reasons why when they first drove into town and they saw the whirlwind, and they're like, speed up. It actually fucked them over, because like any fast movements like fuck you.
Yeah.
They blow the kids away, and then it cuts like Kyrie and Chie are watching this, and they're both like, "This isn't normal," because everyone's like laughing about that they blew him away, and it cuts to Shuichi huddled in a corner with his hands around his legs, like pretty much rocking back and forth. It's going mad, mad. This town will be destroyed. It's turning into a spiral. It's going to become a spiral, a mad spiral. So he's really losing it. But the kids. Didn't go to hell. Instead, what they learned to do is ride the whirlwind.
Yeah, literally. And this is when the story gets so weird that I was like, I just couldn't have imagined this from a horror story. When you have now, it becomes dystopian fiction. The town is destroyed except for the people huddled in these row houses. And outside, those kids taught people that you can ride whirlwinds, and so there are biker gangs essentially, but they're whirlwind gangs.
They ride the whirlwind. Like this felt like this is the third part. Felt like it's showing it to me. These feel like they could be like the Twister twins or something like that. Like One Punch Man has to go and punch them in the face and stop them. Like this really feels over the top. Like they're like it's like a superhero like flying around on the hurricane.
And
Yes.
like they're wearing like these like pilot outfits kind of, and they're like prepare for attack, Roger Wilco, unite and attack, and they're all flying in their whirlwinds. And
they're crashing into like a school, just destroying it.
Yeah, they're just like without being evil, it's destroy towns. Like ha, laughing maniacally.
and Kirie's little brother's like, I'm gonna join that gang.
Yeah, he's like, they're so cool.
Gangs don't have to be hungry. Like they can eat all they want.
Yeah, because I think they go and they steal food from people too and stuff.
It's showing how when, the youth are in desperate positions, sometimes
gangs.
gangs are the only way for them to survive.
Yes, and they learn how to ride hurricanes that way.
Yeah.
Ride the hurricane. So after they destroy the school, they look inside and they find inside the wreckage of the school are more snail people from part 1.
Yeah.
And they're all like inside their shells, protected from like the crash of the rubble. And they come out and it shows you that they are just like 100% snail people.
And I
now.
love that she says to the reporter, they used to be human. The things going on in this town turned some people into snails. And the reporter's like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And Kirie is just like, anyway.
Yeah, I wonder what brought them out.
They all have different human features. Like the one guy had the hair and the teeth. This one has like a really realistic human nose.
Oh yeah,
It's like really weird how they pick like whatever human facial features. Like they're different, but it's creepy. Goddamn.
So Kyrie goes back with Chie after like barely finding any food to the row houses, and now there's people up on the rafters now that it's gotten so crowded, and they're so close together that they're just like shoulder to shoulder in here. And everyone's just getting like really grumpy because no one has any food here. They can't go anywhere else. There's like
And one thing that I like about how crowded this house is it's not just like shoulder to shoulder. Now there's people that like live up in the rafters, just like sitting with their legs hanging over, and like you really get the effect that it's like a refugee house.
Yeah.
And so Shuichi's still like, everyone's mad, and people are like, you're depressing me, get the fuck out of this house, you fucking depressing asshole.
Yeah, so they kick him out. And so, Kyrie and her family decide to leave with him.
They don't get to leave. They go out to see if he's all right, and then they lock the door behind them and say, "Get the fuck out of this house, too."
Yeah, now we got some extra space.
Yeah.
So, Chie explains that she's tried to leave through the tunnel, but for some reason, she can't ever get out.
It just
Like,
keeps
it
going
has no
on
end.
forever, and it starts spiraling down.
And the fucking dad is like, I want to rebuild my furnace and work on the art of the spiral. I need Dragonfly Pond mud again.
Which makes sense. I mean, I feel like the spiral had to get him eventually.
This part really was the part. I think this is the part that affected me the most.
Really?
This is why I love Ito. It's just like this twist is such a good twist because they're going around, they're exploring, and they start smelling like, oh, it smells like food, like someone's cooking something, and they find out it's the Whirlwind Gang, and they have a campfire, and in the middle of the campfire are snail shells that they've been cooking the snail people.
And when they crack open the shells, their inside just ooze out, and it's like the snail like cooked, and there's a skull face on it.
Oh my
Yeah,
God,
there's
it's
like
terrible.
their teeth at it, and then they take a knife and a fork and they just start digging right in and eating those snail people.
This didn't fucking hit you, Phil?
It did. When you said it was the most, I'm like, I could see it actually. The faces especially in this when they're cooked.
And they're like, just think of it as escargot. And Kyrie is like, but that's not escargot. They're human. And they're like, they were human, but not anymore. Stay with us. You can eat as much as you like. And like, it's just like so vivid and horrifying.
Yeah, and they keep talking. Everyone when they eat the snail meat, they talk about how delicious it is. The most the tastiest thing they can ever eat.
Well, they obviously
Yeah.
didn't get to have hospital mushrooms.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's true, actually. Because the hospital mushrooms made people like really go mad.
Oh yeah, and there's another tie-in. Because people kept saying, "Oh, the butterfly effect. Those kids were flying around like butterflies," and the gang says, "We're more like dragonflies. Dragonflies eat meat." Tying it to Dragonfly Pond.
Yeah.
Yep. But then like we go from like the really disgusting eating snail people thing to a whirlwind battle where all these guys start going into whirlwind and fighting Kyrie's family.
Yeah, because the curious like, "This is gross. You guys are fucked up," and they start having a whirlwind battle. More shonen stuff where they're all getting ready for attack formations and they're swirling around them. This really feels like a fucking shonen. Like the arts, like the fucking art style is shonen style. Like they're swirling around them, a lot of motion lines.
Yeah.
Yeah, they like kick them and the whirlwinds come out and stuff.
Yeah.
And then slowly as like they're fighting, they're actually being pulled towards Dragonfly Pond and its giant vortex.
Yeah.
And as they're being sucked in there, like Kirie's grabbing onto Chie, and then Shuichi grabs onto her and then hangs onto a telephone.
Yeah, out of nowhere, he was like a vegetable up until now. Like he grabs Kiryu
Yeah.
just in time.
He really does
And then-
save her like almost every other issue.
I didn't notice that
Yeah.
until we saw it all laid out like that.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then it's just them, like, the Whirlwind Gang gets sucked into the vortex of Dragonfly Pond, and Shuichi's just looking at it going, mad. Mad.
I mean, honestly, he has the most normal reaction of anyone in this town.
He
Like,
does, yeah.
That type of going insane would probably happen to most people here.
So a couple more reporters show up into this town. There's like a whole variety of them that get
And one thing they point out is that no one can leave, but people are still allowed in. So the town just keeps getting more and more
yeah,
crowded.
it even gets people from the neighboring town that Shuichi was going to school at.
Because they
Yeah.
want to come as volunteers to help clean up the town.
And I love
Yeah.
this idea that these people are coming in to help, but since they can't leave, they just become like a bigger part of the problem, and the
Yeah.
city just keeps growing and growing, but it keeps getting worse and worse because there's no food, there's nothing.
Kyrie and her family are living inside a rundown, the roof of one of the old row houses, since the row houses are the only thing that are safe from the whirlwinds, and they can't find their dad because the dad is just missing. They're thinking a whirlwind picked him up and took him away. And so they're looking around, they're trying to figure out, like, where do you go and what do you do? And one of the guys, like, one of the reporter people that came into the town has a shell growing on his back, and then, like, another guy that they're with also has a spiral. And some
And-
other people are like, no, I don't want to be a snail. Which is kind of like a
Yeah,
terrifying
they explain like
thing.
you're probably gonna be a snail soon, and they start freaking out. Which I feel bad for these characters. They're like, they're
Yeah,
no,
because you know this is going to happen to you in this town. That's what that mark means.
And it's such a weird, like, Shuichi's like, I guess because you're moving so slow, because you can't move fast because of the whirlwinds, and if you move so slow, the spiral can catch you and turn you into a snail.
yeah,
Yeah. So you're in like a damned if you do, damned
yeah.
if you
Catch
Yeah.
the 22.
I would rather be killed in a whirlwind.
Yeah, I would be a tornado right in the situation. I would just ride tornadoes.
I mean, the snails look pretty happy.
Yeah, I
when
was about
they
to say,
start
I'd be a
turning.
snail if people didn't eat me.
The problem is you get cooked and eaten.
I don't know.
Yeah.
I think body horror scares me the most. I would rather die in a
Yeah.
fuck.
Me and Darryl will go be snails. And we'll
Honestly,
fuck.
in pretty much any chapter in this book, I think I would just rather die than have to experience it.
Yes, me too.
Phil and I would be snails and have babies.
Yeah, we would just hermaphrodite each other.
Is that a verb?
That's a verb.
I don't know, now it is.
So they go to a row house because they're trying to look for places to get into. And inside this row house, like, no one will let them in. They try and, like, open up the door, and just people stick their heads out and try and, like, blow them away like a whirlwind. Yep, and they're blowing wind at them to try and keep them out, but then the reporters get, like, a giant
Battering ram type thing.
battering ram, yeah, like a log, and they run in, and they smash open the door, and just a pile of intertwined people come out. Like, imagine just, like, arms and legs are all noodly and wrapped around each other.
Everyone's
Yeah.
necks and heads are
faces.
just all together. It's
Yep.
really terrible.
And the row houses, like they got so crammed in together, they just became like intertwined. They explained.
Yeah, kind of like the snakes, but not as intertwined.
Like
or-
vines, they intertwined, you know?
Yeah, right.
Yeah, like the
So
snakes, the
romantic.
snakes were like a rope. These are more like spaghetti or noodles, as the Japanese call
Or
it.
noodles?
It's like if you've ever, like, it's like in horror stuff, like
It's like Mr. Fantastic, like becoming melting into like everyone's Mr.
But like
Fantastic.
so
is-
many of him. It's like in Lovecraftian stuff when there's like these like masses of flesh that are just
like in Castlevania, that boss that's like a ball
Legion.
of humans, like Legion, exactly.
Legion, yeah.
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 Of course, Legion, the Castlevania boss.
As soon as the door busts open and people come out, both ends of the row house burst open with just like this giant singular mass of people coming out of it, and then they start grabbing planks of wood and trying to like block themselves in again to be protected from the whirlwind. And it basically looks like they're extending the row houses as they do.
I love this line where one of the reporters says, "They're trying to add on to the house. I see. So there's that option."
Yeah, which actually becomes a central thing of him later.
And then here's where I was like, finally, the fucking military shows up, and they're like, of course you would send the Navy. So you have this fleet of a fucking giant, like, there's like cruisers and battleships, and they show up and like, they're here to save us. They must have been dispatched by the self-defense troops. And then as they get close to the town, a giant fucking whirlwind or whirlpool just sucks them down into hell. Like, goodbye.
Yep, and then closes back up again like a big mouth. So that's why I was thinking, I'm like, they have no way, because anything coming in by air gets hit by a whirlwind, anything coming in by sea gets sucked down into the whirlpool. Just no one's getting out of this town.
Yeah, and they find more. They find some snail corpses.
I hate this fucking picture.
Oh, yeah, this smashed in snail and just like its head and like the flesh is all like really bubbly now
And
when it gets cooked.
And so all the reporters besides the female reporter and Kyrie are like, let's go eat this snail food.
Well, she doesn't want to at first, and also the guy who's turning into a snail doesn't have any, and his friends are like, we better see he doesn't wander off though, you know?
Shuichi munches down.
Yep, and that's what changes their mind is as they see Shuichi's doing it, they're like, well, he's never been wrong so far.
And then Kyrie says in narration, that night I ate the meat of a snail person.
And we just see the sky, like the night sky.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a hell to live in. To like, this is what you have to do to survive, is eating people.
That's why you fucking hurt Tornado Twins down to fucking school and blow it up and do something cool like that.
That's why you joined the Whirlwind Gang.
Yeah, and so they find Kyrie's little brother, and the shack they were living in got smashed in by a whirlwind. And when they
mom's missing.
When they bring him out, his back is turning into a shell.
This kind of like hit me.
It's because now that they've all invested in eating snails is okay, including Kyrie. You're like, if he's turning into a snail,
they're gonna eat him.
They're gonna eat him.
Yeah.
So they decide it's like, you know what? Let's try and leave. Not through the tunnels, not by sea.
Finally,
Finally,
she's like, you know what? Let's try to get out of here.
I'm out of this town.
A little too late.
Because she points out that when they left the row house with the infections all went away. They stopped having those warts and everything. So she figures if they leave the town, her brother will stop being a snail person.
So they're leaving just through the woods, like Darryl said. They're gonna wander into the mountains and just walk away from this town.
As they're walking, they get an overview of the town. You can see Dragonfly Pond in the middle that looks like a big like whirlpool, and then all the row houses scattered around. And they notice one of the row houses has a guy on top of it, just like building on an extension.
It's the head reporter who like said like, "Oh, extended row house, that's an option." So he's just saying, like, he's saying out to them, "Don't leave. We'll just extend the row house. It's fine, guys. Come back."
Yeah, he says, there'll be a place for all of you here. He shouts and creates a whirlwind at them.
Kyrie's little brother notices that every row house in town from this view you can see faces Dragonfly Pond.
Yeah.
As if they're all like, pieces of some big...
Yeah, part of a system.
One of the things that I liked a lot before they left the town is they were like, there's no trail, like every trail's been tried, where do we even go? And they were like, let's just pretty much just go random. So what they do is they just like set up a stick and just let the stick fall over and they just go in whatever direction it points.
Yeah.
And so two of the other structures that I also like in this book that are still standing is still like that thing that creates the sirens, even though there's no electricity in this town, that the loud ear-piercing sirens and the lighthouse. Those are the two things left standing.
Did you guys notice that the sirens, the speakers are spirals?
Yeah. I like that a lot.
Everything's spirals.
And the trees, as they're going into the forest, are spirals. The grass is all spiraling.
That's the thing. There's so much detail that he draws in the grass, like 1,000 spirals in every
Yeah, this
panel.
must have taken forever to just boop, 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 boop,
Yeah.
and draw. That's what that sound was.
Yeah, I can tell.
Darryl's the artist. He knows.
So it was a spiral sound. So they walk through the forest, and they run into the other reporters, the guys who had been eating snails. And they're like, oh, like, we were following you guys, but they run into each other head first.
So like killers are spiraling around, going in circles in this forest.
Yep, and the guy who had a snail-like pattern on his back, this guy is now being led around by a leash.
And they're like, why do you have him tied up? And he's like, he's the most important member of our party. His shell's full of meat, and soon enough, he'll turn into a snail, and then we'll eat him.
And
Yeah,
he
and they're
says
like,
this to him, and it's so sad.
Because his eyes are white at this point, kind of. And also, what's really sad here is, remember we said before, Kirie's little brother is turning into a snail, and he says on their journey, Kirie, my back itches, I need you to scratch it. And all three reporters turn around with these, like, eyes that were just like, what?
Yeah, they're like, what does that mean? But then they get distracted because the guy who they're dragging along by the leash, his eyes just pop out of his face into, like, the snail version, and that's when we know. I like that it's been established that that's when it's like then you turn to a snail dude and he drops down onto the ground.
Yeah.
And his pants come out.
Yeah.
So then he turns into a snail, and this to me was the worst part of this like whole
Oh my
sort of most
God.
horrific
Oh
thing
my God.
because this one guy like pulls out a knife and he's like, "That's it, let's eat him," because
He wants to pulls out the knife, and the guy crawls into his shell because he doesn't want to get killed.
Yeah, and no, their mouths are watering. By the way, they're like so anxious to eat this guy.
Yep. A guy pulls out a knife. He crawls into his shell because he doesn't want to get killed.
And so we know
another
that
guy
we know they're sentient enough to realize what's happening then.
Yeah.
I was like, oh my god, like, oh my god.
And a guy takes a rock and he's like, let's crack the shell open. And it's like, hold on, I want to just try and eat this dude raw because we know what they taste like cooked. What does it taste like raw? And he goes on the ground, he lies down, and he crawls into that snail's shell and eats this dude face first. It explicitly says
And they
face
say,
first.
like, and they're like, that's enough, you bastard. Don't eat all of it. Come out. And they're, like, trying to pull his legs out.
Yeah, they're upset that he's eating him by himself, not that he's eating him alive
So
at all.
horrible.
And as he just these panels, it's just him deeper and deeper into the snail shell with these munching noises, and like he goes so far in that they start pulling him by the legs.
Yeah, it's just his feet.
And
sticking
Kirie
out.
and the others are like, we gotta go, especially since the brothers turned to a snail, unbeknownst to these guys.
So they leave and they're like, we have to find like you can find north by looking at a wood stump, and they try and look, but then Shuichi sees his father in it, telling him to come join the spiral now.
I
Which is
like
kinda
this touch
these
a
are
lot.
These are the signs that it's like you're kind of gonna die soon at this rate. Once
And it
the
also,
spiral
like,
is telling you.
really brings, because I feel like the second half starts bringing in things again, like it brought back the snails. Now it brings back this from the first chapter,
Yeah,
and I like that.
it's the same face he had in the cask when he was smushed.
Yeah.
Yeah, now they just lose track of time because.
Oh yeah, they look at their watches, and the watches hands are all spirals.
Spirals?
Yeah.
So they're Kirie's trying to bring her brother around because he's starting to eat plants and stuff. And then eventually they run again into the other reporters that
God.
ate their friend. And
And
they're
then-
like, why'd you leave us?
Their eyes, yeah, his mouth is covered in, I guess, like snail blood.
Slime.
And yeah, his eyes are wide, and he's, why'd you leave us? And they're like, oh, we didn't mean to. We just got lost. And he goes, oh, that poor kid must be so tired. Is something wrong with his back? And they're like, no, he's carrying a backpack. And they're like, I see. Well, let's all work together. Why don't I carry him? And they're like, no,
Yeah, it's-
I'll carry him.
Yeah.
But yeah, Shuichi ends up carrying him. So he's still like hanging on to his sanity just a little bit. And as he's carrying him, this was the worst part because you know shit's about to go down, is the little brother's eyes start popping out of his head like the snails do with their antennae.
And they try to cover up his eyes so the other people don't see it.
But then his
Yep.
pants fall off. He just becomes a snail. Like,
Yep, so they run away. They end up finding like cliffs that overlook the town again, which means that they went in a full they went halfway around the whole town. And so they're by the cliff, and Kirie is like, since snails can climb on walls, let's just drop them off. Let's put them on the cliff and let them just run down. And she had to do the thing like where you have to yell at the dog to get it to go.
Yeah, so he's hitting him, saying, "Go away, get away, run."
Yeah, she's hitting him with the stick, and she's telling him, just go. And then she promises to come back.
I have mocked that trope so many times.
it's always
because,
good.
but it's always good.
It's always good. I
Yeah.
definitely agree.
So the brother leaves, and they're all bummed about. To comfort each other, they end up. The guy that crawled into the shell starts talking about how great that felt to like go around in a spiral, around and around, and then he just starts, unprompted, he just starts twirling his arms and legs and spine, and all the other guys start doing it too, thinking about how good they taste.
But yeah, they think about how great it is to be a spiral, and they literally become spirals. Like their bodies just contort into these fucked up, and they're screaming in like happiness, I guess. And their eyes are crazed, and they're just like breaking their bodies to spiral. God.
Yep,
Yeah.
and that's the end of those guys because they just walk away. They're like, "Oh, okay, you're
Yeah, they're
spirals
dead.
now." And then they reemerge upon town and we get this great 2-page scene
I love
of
this.
all of the row houses. Somehow, like hundreds of them have formed a giant spiral, like wooden spiral, leading to the center of town.
Yeah, they're almost all connected now.
Yeah, there's a couple holes here and there.
you can see down there where they added on, like there's the run down darker shaded row houses, and then there's just this huge like portion of like the realistic ones, and they're like, this had to have taken years. Like, how long were we outside of this place? Like, what had happened?
And they say like we were only in the hills for. Wait, how long were we there? I can't recall.
And then so they end up going inside of the row houses, like between the alleyways.
Between them. It's like a path. It's like a spiral path heading towards the center.
Yeah.
Yep. Because they just start walking around.
They call it the labyrinth.
And it's making them feel dizzy, but Chie notices that there's like no twisters or anything, so that they can like move.
Yeah, when you're in between the row houses, you're safe from the effects of the whirlwind stuff.
Yeah. And then people just start opening up the doors of the row houses, and they're throwing out all these like spirally.
By people, he means that massive flesh again.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're throwing out with their hands like spirally naked flesh, like corpses, because they just died, and they're like, "This really smells. Can you get rid
And
of
she's
this?"
looking for her parents.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Kyrie.
And the guy who was extending the row houses now goes around like picking up these dead bodies. He's like a bearded like a hermit looking guy now.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's like the Monty Python scene. You know, he's the bring out your dead guy.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I love that this guy's unaffected by the spirals because all he wants, he's just like an architect that works for it now. So it can't turn him into a spiral because he's helping build these row houses.
Yeah, and it's through him that they learned that actually years have passed by while they're in the woods, even though it felt like only a few hours. And he says, "Oh, it's been years, and you look just as young as you did before." Like, wow.
Yep, and then Kyrie asks, "Have you seen my father? He's a potter." And he's like, "Oh yeah, I've heard about a couple that was still making pottery by Dragonfly Pond, which is in the middle of the spiral."
And he says, ceramics is the art of the spiral. And they're like, that's definitely him. Like, he does say that.
Yep.
That's my dad.
Yep, and then he's like, "Oh, see you later, guys. Good luck." He's like the one non-twisted person in this. He's kind of twisted, but like reasonably.
And this is where we kind of get some like overarching cosmic lore where Shuichi's like thinking like they're rebuilding the town in a spiral for some reason, but like maybe this is a thing that happens. Like maybe every few centuries the spiral comes back to this town and the inhabitants of the town rebuild it in this shape, and that's why those old row houses were like that. And they know it couldn't have been too long ago because the old row houses that were part of the previous spiral are made of wood, so like wood doesn't actually last like thousands of years. So it must have only been like maybe a few hundred, and they're like, how could we have never heard of this? But they're like, people just get like it gets caught in this.
You get caught in the spiral, and
Yeah.
none of this.
He said
information
everyone
gets
that knew about it probably died. And there are hints about this throughout the book. Like, they ask how old are the row houses, and somebody says like they're like late 19th century, and then like they find that old map that's like an old map that shows the row houses in the spiral. Like there are at first I was like, is he just gonna dump this out of nowhere? But there are hints to it.
Yeah.
And they have to pass through like openings in the row houses sometimes to get through. And as they're doing it, the noodly people inside are trying to build it and close it up, and trying to get past these gaps before the noodle people close it up again.
Yeah.
But unfortunately, the reporter lady who was introduced at the beginning of this arc, she doesn't like get through in time when they close it up, and she is just gone. They wall it up, and she's out of there.
Well, what happens is as they connect that last piece of row house, we hear all of the row house noodle people saying, we're connected here too, over here too," and all of a sudden there's this loud like
sure, it says.
Yeah, and this rumbling happens throughout the whole town. Something is moving through the row houses, and when they peek open into the row houses, they're empty. All the noodle people are gone.
And by they, it's just Kyrie and
Shuichi,
Shuichi now
yeah.
left.
Yes.
And so they go through the row houses since they're empty, and they walk all the way to the end of the spiral, which is where the lake is, but the lake is completely empty, and instead it's just a spiral staircase leading
Spiral stone staircase.
down. And out of the middle of the spiral staircase is the ash that's swirling up into the sky. So this begins like the final chapter of they start by walking down the spiral staircase like
Holding
slowly.
hands.
Yeah.
And like with the lighthouse, they say it's like it's going on forever. And if you look down in the middle, you start to be mesmerized by the spiral and start to like tip over and everything, and you're not sure how much time passes. And they find a dead body that didn't make it out of the exodus from the row houses.
Because it seems like that whole mass in the spiral of the row houses all became like one big fleshy noodle human thing and slid. It fucking slid through that whole spiral of row houses down this whole
staircase into whatever's at the bottom of here. And this was great because I love this series for constantly pushing you forward and being like, what the hell is happening? Because for a while you're just like, yeah, it's just a town of crazy spirals. But here, by like, when this starts happening, you're like, there's a plan. There is something that's trying to do something, like make a big spiral.
Yeah, that's something I like about this versus Gyaro, is that this it all feels like it's leading to something by the end.
Yeah. Whereas Gyaro was kind of just like pure chaos in a way.
Yeah. And Gyo, I feel like the premise kind of went a little stale for me after a while, because whereas this is constantly reinventing itself, where every chapter stood out to me as unique.
Mm-hmm. And so they're walking down, and this guy's not quite dead yet, this noodly person that was left, and he's like,
lying on the stairs.
There's supposed to be something wonderful down there. And they leave him behind because they're running out of strength too, since they haven't eaten or drank anything in who knows how long in the time spiral. And this guy grabs onto Kyrie and he starts trying to like bite her leg, and Shuichi goes to grab him and like toss him off, and instead like they both fall off because the guy wraps himself around Shuichi.
Yeah.
And they just fall down the middle of the stairwell down into who knows.
And Kyrie starts running down the stairs, trying to desperately hope that Shuichi's alive at the bottom.
Mm-hmm. And she sees there's a light down below, and this is such like a great series of events and drawings. She walks down the stairs, and then she sees what looks like a snail shell just sitting at the bottom of this staircase in like the middle of this whiteness. And when you flip this page, it's not a snail shell. It's the top of this stone drill that had drilled up into the cavern, or like that's pointing at the top of this cavern. And it's just this giant, massive, empty cavern that when she tries to drop down, she drops down onto this giant, like tower-like drill. And she falls all the way to the bottom and lands on the fleshy noodle people. It's like an ocean of them.
Yeah, like an ocean of faces, essentially.
Yeah, and they're all looking up, and all of their eyes are white, and they're looking up at this giant spiral.
Yeah, it's like a metropolis, but they're all like all these structures, like skyscraper-looking things with all spirals everywhere.
It's one of those like Lovecraftian things where it's kind of weird to describe because there's nothing that looks similar to it. There's like spires everywhere, but they're made out of like. Some of them are just like straight spirals, but then they bloom into circular, like just like clumps of spirals.
Yeah.
And then it looks like there's like these giant spiral lights that are emanating just this light that these people are captivated by.
Oh, they call it a city of spirals, literally. Kyrie
and Kyrie notices that this mass of people all looking up some of them are starting to turn into stone, and they're starting to turn into these ruins, like they're becoming the city.
Yep. And she finds like her mom and dad in there.
They're stone.
As stone. They're stoned.
Yep. And then she also finds who fell at the bottom of this place is Shuichi, who's now like on the ground. And it's like, I can't walk anymore, but look at this thing. And then he kind of just exposits like vaguely about like, it seems like it does this every few hundred or thousands of years, that it starts this process where it summons all of like everyone into it.
Yeah, it's still building itself and expanding.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And then he says like he can't go on.
And he tells her like you have to stop the curse somehow. She says no, I can't go on either. So they both of them just hold each other's hands. They become noodle people and entwine with each other.
Yep. And then suddenly like the whole spiral city starts making a bunch of noise. It starts like glowing, and then the tower drill ends up drilling up the spiral staircase back up, and it like completes the spiral with the row houses now.
Right. So there's a big spiral of row houses, and the center is at that little snail shell looking thing.
Yeah, that leads down into the spiral city, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah. And it says like this curse happened before it happened again. This spiral city will keep expanding over.
Yeah, and she explains like that when they're like intertwined and holding hands, that as soon as the spiral completed, that time pretty much froze for them endlessly.
Yeah.
But it will resume again as soon as the spiral needs to be like completed once more.
And the ending, like when they were leading up to the ending and I knew I was like almost done, I was like, there is no satisfying way that he's going to explain what's going on. And then he like doesn't explain it at all, and he's just like, it's this mystery curse. And I like was so happy with that. Because like I didn't want some like bullshit, like, oh, it's an ancient people that like this is their magic. No, it's just like it's this weird shit. Nobody can understand it, and it's just gonna happen again.
Yep.
Yeah, it's stuff that like they they try and like he tries to answer your questions, but by doing so he poses more questions, which is kind of like the ideal in this horror story where you're like, okay, now I understand why all these spiral things were happening, because it needed to complete this spiral process, but you still don't know why it needed to do this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, all you know is this is just a thing that keeps happening every so often, that everyone turns into messy flesh noodle spiral city people.
Yep.
And that's life. I like the idea that like it's just like the spirals in nature. It's some kind of natural phenomenon that you don't need to really explain, because it's just like it's one of those things like they exposit a little at the beginning how it's like it's just a natural
Occurring
thing. Yeah,
like
like
pattern. Yeah,
right. And they do that in the good spiral tropes and like in Gurren Lagann too. Like DNA is a spiral. And
his dad mentioned it, or Kyrie's dad mentioned it in the pottery thing, where he's like, this is a pattern that you can't really grasp because you can't see the overall picture of. Which, there's a bonus chapter at the very end of this that's about like this guy that just like Shuichi. This takes place before Kyrie cuts off her hair.
Yeah, this could have been the bonus chapter inserted into like the early parts when it was more episodic.
Yeah, but Shuichi discovers like a spiral galaxy, and then more of them start forming, and people start seeing like more of them, and then this guy wants to take like credit for it, and then they start hearing each other's voices because of this. Like they're radioing into each other's like, heads.
Yeah, everyone becomes telepathic basically.
Yeah. And then it ends with pretty much like the spirals exploding this guy's head and then disappearing. In the
his head becomes a galaxy. His head explodes and becomes a galaxy,
Yeah.
and he joins the other galaxies.
And I'm really glad that wasn't included, because that's the only time that the spiral comes from outside the city.
That's what I was thinking. That's why I didn't like that, is because that the town is the source of the spiral, like Dragonfly Pond. Whereas here, this is just like spirals doing this.
Definitely agree.
I took it as like when these galaxies come closer to the city, they were being affected by the city, because it's all about how the cities are sucking them in and affecting them. Everything that's coming here.
I mean, we don't see like mountains flying off in the distance to join with the spiral. So I don't know about
I think
galaxies.
just because mountains don't form a spiral pattern, but galaxies do, like the Milky Way galaxy. I
Yeah.
think that's the idea here.
It really was like he wanted to incorporate galaxy spiral arms somehow, but
Yeah.
I think my problem is more that his head explodes and becomes like I think of the idea of like this the galaxy spiraling towards the center seems creepy in a sense, but I don't think the story does enough with it.
Yeah, I don't think the story is necessarily like bad or anything. It just I don't think it fits the way every other chapter fits.
Yeah, I agree with
this
that.
and the hair story could have been probably
Yeah.
Oh man, and
So-
that was so. I remember I was first recommending this to you guys. I'm like, this is gonna be like a long 2-parter. Should this really be a story? Could they read it on their own time? And it was in the final arc where everything starts finally coming together, and you get like payoffs from reading the older stories.
Yeah.
That's where I was like, this is such a rad story.
So obviously we all like this a lot and would read more Junji Ito. But the question that I have for you guys, because I feel like the would you read more is a obvious one at this point. Is this your favorite Ito we've done so far?
yes.
Yes.
For me,
Yeah, for me too. Because like I didn't like Gyo nearly as much as Amagara Fault, but this like it. I just thought it was.
It's like if you could somehow turn Amagara Fault into like a series.
Gyo, when I read Gyo, like it felt like this has a lot of interesting concepts to it, but I don't know if it works as a whole story. Like
yeah, Gyo has a lot of like extremely creepy, unnerving stuff.
yeah, it does, but like I felt like maybe he works better in a short story format, and I think this is the best of both worlds, where he has all these new concepts coming of these short story formats in the beginning, but then he comes in at the end and like brings it all together. I think this works more to his strengths.
Absolutely. Cool. So that brings another Halloween extravaganza to a close.
Itober to a close.
Yeah, Junji Itober. So we were talking about this a little bit because, like, before we started recording, because as I said at the beginning of last episode, I am not a horror fan generally. And, like, especially with horror movies, like, I can appreciate the craft of a movie, but, like, I don't really have much interest in it. I don't really care all that much. So, like, that stuff, like, I understand it conceptually, and I'm like, oh, that is cool if someone who knows about it talks to me about it. But, like, with this, I feel like Ito is such a master of the comic book page, and the pacing of it and the angles that he chooses. Like, he does even just that scene when she's walking down the spiral at the very end. It's zooming in, but we still see the camera over her shoulder, so we're still in her perspective as it zooms down this hole. And then when the camera flips and we see her looking down, it's because we've been over her shoulder the whole time. It's like this dramatic shift in perspective.
Yeah, it goes from claustrophobic to more of like this, like, whoa, like there's too much space. It's sort of like going from like a light scene to a dark scene in a movie, or a dark scene to a light scene.
And like, Ito is such a perfect like craftsman of the manga format that like I get so drawn in, and even though this isn't the kind of story I would ever pick up on my own, every time you recommend one of these, Darryl, and I read it, I'm like, this is so good.
He's a really good artist.
Yeah.
And he spends like looking at these like pages, and as someone that does a lot of repetitive work sometimes in his design, I'm like, there is no way I could ever like match his like tenacity for drawing some of the like repeatable patterns that he does.
But it's not just the art, because like there are some comic book artists that are great artists but don't frame the narrative as interestingly. Like, their art like looks great. Like, I feel like when we did Cry for Justice, it was like that, where the art, when I look at a page, I'm like, this is great, but I don't necessarily get a sense of the dynamics of the story. But
motion and like emotional energy sometimes. Like, I feel like Ito does great with the patterns, like Darryl mentioned. His people, I love how he draws people's faces. Like, you can always tell their emotion.
He's not a good artist, like in that regard. But like,
I'm saying that. I'm saying all three. Like, he frames the shot well. He moves the camera where it needs to be. The ethereal camera of the viewer. Emotions are very clear. Obviously, you get a sense of motion of the panels, and you have all these intricate patterns going on in the background. It's like all the elements you need to make the story work. Like, there's not a single element I don't think could have been done better in terms of art.
Andy's the writer of the story.
So, does anybody have anything else they really want to say?
Let's watch the movie sometime and see what that's like.
I would watch that. Maybe we'll do that for a Patreon bonus.
I watched a trailer of it and I was like, this is just really weird.
Yeah,
like,
unlike the story, this is weird.
Well, it's different when you see the movie's live action, so you get to see people performing these things of like the effects, how they do like the twirling eyes as the camera's like zooming in on their face and they're going, ah!
Okay, so if you want to hear that eventually, maybe you should subscribe to the Patreon, and we get new bonus episodes every month. So it's almost a new month, so we'll have a new bonus soon. So go to patreon.com/flying machine
/hell
and also check out all the other shows there, like Falling in Love Montage. It's a little bit of an older episode, but I would recommend their semi-recent episode, Mumford, from last month, because they go into a really interesting discussion about like therapy and the role of the therapist, and like when that trust is abused and is that forgivable or not. And I definitely recommend it as a exceptional episode. So that's Falling in Love Montage, Mumford. So yeah, check that and all the other shows out at the Flying Machine website, flyingmachine.network. And that's all I have. Anybody else?
Nope.
Happy Halloween.
Happy Halloween, fuckers.
Happy Halloween.
Don't become a snail. I'll fucking eat you.
S-Car, go to the polls. Am I right, guys?
Yeah, you're right.
All right, so thank you all for listening to Divisive Issues. I've been blown to hell by a bunch of kids.
I've been eating so much that I'm now a spiral.
I've been hermaphroditing with Darryl.
And every 2 weeks I've been spiraling you guys together to record a podcast. The ritual is complete. End
Stay
it.
continuity.